All right. This is the Recursive Radicalism of Nick Fuentes, written and read by me, Abe Zucca. Check out my art at zuccagallery.com. Also, Google the name Abe Zucca. Check out my social media accounts. This channel, this live channel, is only growing. Get on the bandwagon early. If you happen to live in Phoenix, you can check out my gallery in downtown Phoenix. It's also a used bookstore, thousands of books for sale. Everything under $10. Let's begin. This is part 12. We'll keep going. We'll see how long we can keep this going until I get distracted by something else I want to read that I've written. So part 12, the Stalin question. The Joseph Stalin question. The Stalin question. The double-faced interview. And the industrial eschatology of America First. The industrial eschatology of America First. Great men leave scars on the earth, lesser men leave commentary. Every accusation seeks a ritual confession. Every confession masks a deeper desire. Industrialization is the modern Tower of Babel. Its builders, saints or demons, depending on only on who writes the chronicle. The clip, the setup, and the ritual of public inquisition. On the Stalin remark, the politicization of fascination and the demand for disavowal. In modern political spectacle, a single sentence, "I am a fan of Stalin," becomes less a statement than a liturgy. A secular heresy test through which the audience decides whether the speaker is a man, a mythic villain, or a conveniently packaged monster to hang ideological anxieties upon. The clip becomes an idol. Its context becomes its shadow. Viewers watch not for nuance, but for confirmation of their pre-existing myth. That admiration for a historical figure must necessarily mean endorsement of his cruelties, rather than fascination with his transformation of a civilization. The demand to ask him about Stalin reveals the deeper craving of the crowd to witness a confession, a renunciation, a symbolic purification, ritual in which the speaker is forced to bow before the moral order of the host and the algorithm. Every era has its forbidden names. In ours, invoking Stalin outside the script of pure condemnation becomes a semiotic crime, the kind that activates the digital priesthood into calls for excommunication. Disavowal culture has replaced dialectics. The question is not why one finds a figure compelling, but whether one will be obedient to the ritual choreography of denunciation. The host must ask about Stalin not because he personally cares, but because the digital crowd requires the blood sacrifice of inquiry to validate the integrity of the interviewer. To refuse to ask is to risk the change of softness. To ask is to perform the sacred rite of transparency. To answer is to risk eternal deformation of context. Thus, the clip becomes a trial, the interview a courtroom, and the political thinker a defendant in the theater of reputational jurisprudence. Every figure with controversial associations become a Rorschach blot, onto which the public projects its fears about tyranny, identity, and the fragility of American institutions. Political fascination is conflated with moral allegiance because the populace has forgotten the historical understanding requires entering the psychology of those one condemns. This produces a paradox. The more one attempts to clarify, the more the audience hears evasion. The more one admits nuance, the more the mob demands simplicity. Thank you. Thank you for liking the channel. I hope you're a real person. Because when you said, I love that book, it's impossible because I'm the only one who has the book. The algorithm desires villains, the crowd desires confession, the host desires plausible deniability, and the interview becomes a ritual triangle in which all three find temporary satisfaction. In such a system, truth becomes secondary to optics, and optics become the new metaphysics of the digital agora. The two-faced interviewer and the duplicity of media friendship. On Tucker, Candace post-show transformations and the duplicity built into media ecosystems. The great experiences, the old rite of the political pariah, the warm, conciliatory dinner conversation, followed by the cold, punitive post-show commentary, a transformation as predictable as the shedding of a snake's skin. Media figures possess dual identities, the gracious host who can't risk confrontation, and the righteous post-interview warrior who performs bravery only once the guest has left the room. The failure to challenge during the interview is not cowardice, but performance. Stagecraft designed to keep the conversation flowing and the algorithm satisfied. But the post-interview condemnation is its own performance, a signal to the gatekeepers that the host remains in moral alignment with institutional expectations. Thus, duplicity is not personal treachery, but structural necessity. The media ecosystem rewards mildness in the room and militancy afterwards. The guest learns painfully that private agreement is irrelevant, only the public ritual matters. Only the spell cast before millions has true political effect. The host invokes anti-Semitism, not as an analysis, but as a protective talisman, an all-purpose ward against accusations that he platforms someone outside the Overton perimeter. Thus, the interview becomes a three-act drama: the cordial encounter, the viral clip, the moral distancing, each act necessary for the host's survival within media hierarchies. The pariah, meanwhile, is expected to accept this duplicity as the price of participation. Outrage is permitted only if it can be clipped into content. In this economy of optics, sincerity becomes liability. Only friction generates value. The host post-show condemnation becomes a political purification ritual, an abolition designed to maintain credibility with institutional allies. The guest's frustration arises not from disagreement, but from the asymmetry. He was expected to speak plainly, while the host is allowed two contradictory versions of himself. This reveals the true power dynamic. The guest seeks truth, the host seeks reputational equilibrium. In such a world, the honest extremist is always more coherent than the cautious centrist, for the former knows he will be hated either way. Meanwhile, the centrist must continually reinvent his moral posture, depending on who is watching, which produces a strange, shimmering duplicity. Thus, modern political discourse pits the single-faced against the double-faced, the unfiltered against the self-curating, two species of rhetorical animal in permanent collision. The public senses the duplicity, even if subconsciously, which is why these confrontations serve as stages upon which authenticity and performance blur into a single confused spectacle. In this sense, the Stalin remark is less scandalous than the two-faced commentary it provoked. For authenticity, even dark authenticity, remains more compelling than strategic ambivalence. The Stalin question as mythic template. On Stalin as archetype, industrialization as mythic project, and the fascination with effective evil. Stalin appears in political myth not as a moral figure, but as an archetype of transformation. The man who took a medieval agrarian empire and forced it brutally and possibly into the industrial age. Fascination with Stalin arises not from admiration, but from awe at the scale of transformation, the way violence and modernization become intertwined in the birth of a superpower. Every empire mythologizes its founders. Stalin, for better or worse, is the architect of Soviet industrial destiny, and thus irresistible to those fascinated with civilizational engineering. To admit fascination is not to condone atrocities, but to acknowledge that historical villains often possess the virtues of action, decisiveness, and strategic vision that modern democracies sorely lack. The political mind is drawn to figures whose successes and atrocities are inseparable, for they force us to confront the terrifying question of whether progress and brutality are historically entangled. In the Stalin mythos, industrialization becomes a scared guest, a Promethean theft of fire, purchased not with foresight or genius, but with the blood and suffering of millions. Americans recoil at the comparison because their own industrialization was gradual, commercial, and decentralized. They fear the mirror that shows them what forced modernization looks like without a frontier to absorb the violence. The guest remark highlights a suppressed truth. The nation, in moments of existential crisis, often turn to brutal accelerants to compensate for structural weakness. His fascination reveals the lure of decisive state, the fantasy of rapid transformation that bypass bureaucratic stagnation. But the fascination is not endorsement, it is the recognition that history is written by those who bend reality to their will, for better or for worse. In the age of American decline, the example of Soviet accelerationism becomes a cautionary object of study, a reminder of what desperation can achieve and what it can destroy. Interlocutors mistake the analysis of moral equivalence because contemporary discourse cannot distinguish between understanding and approval. Yet the very refusal to perform the standard denunciatory script becomes itself a political heresy. Proof to critics that the speaker is ideological impure. Thus, Stalin, long dead, continues to operate as a symbolic gatekeeper for the acceptable boundaries of historical curiosity. In this sense, the Stalin question is not about Stalin, but about whether one is allowed to think about history non-morally in a moralizing age. The modern audience, trained to consume narratives of good and evil, recoils from ambiguity, demanding instead a tidy moral arc. But political thinkers often inhabit ambiguity, for ambiguity is where power is understood rather than merely condemned. Thus, the Stalin discussion becomes a litmus test, not of morality, but of whether the speaker thinks historically or tribally. The interview becomes a drama of mythic confrontation. The thinker who invokes forbidden figures and the host who must walk the tightrope between curiosity and condemnation. In this way, Stalin's segment reveals more about the epistemic fragility of American discourse than it does about Stalin himself. American industrial eschatology. On urgency, deindustrialization, national strategy, and the dream of nonviolent acceleration. Behind the Stalin fascination lies a deeper anxiety. America's gradual decline from industrial superpower to post-industrial consumer empire. The guest's argument that America must re-industrialize not through violence but through ambition reveals a yearning for national purpose lost in the fog of globalism. Stalin becomes a parable of urgency, a reminder that nations facing existential threats cannot rely on the slow organic mechanisms of the market alone. America's industrial decay is not merely economic but spiritual, a loss of productive identity, replaced by financial abstraction and algorithmic governance. Thus, the invocation of a 5-year plan is not literal desire for authoritarianism, but metaphorical longing for coordinated national will. The guest draws a distinction between Stalin's brutality and Stalin's strategic foresight, suggesting that industrial resurrection can be achieved without terror. His point is simple: urgency does not require tyranny, but it does require leadership capable of articulating national destiny. The libertarian host partially agrees, revealing an unusual overlap. Both see deindustrialization as geopolitical suicide. This convergence hints that the American right, fragmented into libertarian, populist, and reactionary strands, is united by one fear: the rise of China as techno-industrial hegemon. Thus, the Stalin analogy is not ideological, it is civilizational. It asks whether America can act before it is eclipsed. The guest's admiration for JFK moonshot illustrates that even democratic societies once embraced timelines, targets, and epic ambitions. The industrial eschatology proposed here is not one of doom, but of rebirth, that America must rediscover its capacity for national mobilization without succumbing to totalitarian temptation. Traffic, subsidies, public works, strategic planning, these tools become not ideological betrayals, but instruments of national survival. The host's skepticism reflects the American tension between economic freedom and geopolitical necessity, a tension unresolved since Hamilton and Jefferson. Thus, reindustrialization becomes a mythic project, a new Promethean theft, not of fire but of factories. Its success depends not on coercion, but on consensus that decline is real and reversible. The guest believes that America must choose ambition over entropy. The host believes ambition must never become coercion. Yet both agree that American supremacy cannot endure without a renewal of productive power. This shared conviction marks the beginning of a new industrial ideology on the American right, one that blends nationalism, pragmatism, and myth. Such an ideology seeks neither Stalinist brutality nor libertarian inertia, but a synthesis capable of generating national purpose. In this sense, the Stalin discussion is merely a doorway. The real subject is America's destiny. And so, the interview ends not with condemnation nor exoneration, but with a question echoing across the Republic. What kind of nation must America become to survive the century? And we'll close on that. What kind of nation does America need to become in order to survive? What does it need to adapt to and change to? I'm Abe Zucca. This is the end of part 12. Check out my art at zuccagallery.com. I will see you guys later.